Hello, welcome. You're listening to Season 3 of Narcolepsy Navigators, brought to you by Naps for Life CIC. Narcolepsy Navigators is a podcast for raising awareness of these fascinating illnesses through a deep dive into the lives and individuals living with narcolepsy, idiopathic hypersomnia, and Klein-Levin syndrome. I'm Carly Boga, the founder of Naps for Life CIC, and welcome to our stories. Hi everyone, welcome to Narcolepsy Navigators. This is Curly, your host. I have narcolepsy type 1, and today we're here with Gina. Gina is a mother and her son has narcolepsy type 1, and today we're going to have the caregiver's perspective. Welcome to her story. Hi Gina, how are you?
Hello, Carly. Thank you so much for having me. It's always so nice to see you, and I think you're doing amazing work. You're bringing so much awareness and support on the front lines, and you do so in a very consistent, thoughtful manner. So I was really excited when you asked me to do the podcast because I always like spending time with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you accepted because this is a new avenue which I definitely wanted to go down, bringing caregivers on and also spouses on to see what was their take on things.
I think that that's a discussion that I often don't hear about, is that other piece, that other side of loved ones caring for those with narcolepsy, parents, grandparents, any caregiver of a child. I come from the child perspective because our son was 6 when he became symptomatic.
Before you go into that, I just want you to introduce yourself. Who
Sure.
you are, what country are you residing in, and what do you do for a living and like a hobby of yours?
Sure. So my name is Gina Singh, and I am from America. I live near San Francisco, California, Menlo Park. And currently I am the executive director of Sing Family Initiative, which is a nonprofit that focuses on 2 main initiatives. One is learning disabilities for children, and the second is for narcolepsy.
Very nice. And you are a mother and a wife?
Yes, so far today, yes, I'm a mother and a wife. I have 3 beautiful children, and indeed, one of them does have narcolepsy. I have been together with my mate for about 26 years, and I'm grateful that we have weathered many, many storms, including the journey of narcolepsy.
So let's hear about that journey. So what year was your son diagnosed?
So he was actually symptomatic at the age of 6.
It was an early onset for him.
Very early. And it was a very gradual onset. It was not acute at all. It was very gradual. It took about 3 years to diagnose him. And we actually received multiple diagnoses of everything under the sun. Some of them were quite scary, that his life expectancy would not have been too long. And the symptoms sometimes were very intermittent. And that is what was so confusing. You know, one minute we might be in the emergency room because we didn't know what the cataplexy was and it looked like a stroke. And then the next minute we're looking at behaviors and we're like, well, maybe there's a behavioral issue. So I remember I was at a conference one year at Disneyland in California. And my friend was with us. She happens to be actually our family physician. And she says to me, Gina, no child falls asleep at Disneyland. And here our son is like, he can't wake up. And I thought to myself, yeah, like that's right. What kid falls asleep at Disneyland?
Yeah, it's like the most exciting place to be.
And by the time you're on year 3 of trying to figure out what's going on, you're in it where, certain behaviors or symptoms just became normalized, and you become like immune to it. And it wasn't until someone else said to me, this is not normal.
So what behaviors were happening like at the beginning that in the end normal?
The excessive daytime sleepiness. But even at 6 years old, he would take naps, after school. But this was gradually a little bit more than what was normal. Tantrums, because he was deliriously tired, but us not knowing that he actually wasn't getting very good sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got back from Disneyland, she actually ordered a sleep study at UCLA,
Oh,
and we got in right away. And he did a nighttime and daytime sleep study. We consulted with the chief of sleep medicine. She was a neurologist. And this was a no-brainer. It was a slam dunk diagnosis that he had narcolepsy with cataplexy.
when your friend who's your physician, when she suggested to do the sleep study, did you have any idea of what would come up? Did she like give you examples of things that they might find, or it was just like, okay, let's do the sleep study and see what happens?
Yeah, no clue.
Okay. When they told you had narcolepsy, had you heard of narcolepsy before? Did you know what it was?
Well, I have a nursing background, and I had a friend whose mom had narcolepsy,
Oh.
and I was never around his mom, but he just briefly mentioned it. But I had no concept of what narcolepsy was, right? And I just remember receiving the diagnosis. And I don't know if I'm the only parent that felt this way, but I was really relieved. I was really happy because we weren't dealing with a life-threatening diagnosis.
Mm.
So remember, for the past 3 years, we're like going all over the state of California, seeing different specialists, geneticists, neurologists, and, everyone's like throwing out these different diagnoses. And when I got narcolepsy, I'm like, oh, okay, we can handle this.
You're not gonna die, yeah.
Right, right. And I remember us going to go get his toy because I said, if you do this sleep study, I'll go get you a toy. I'm always bribing my kids. And I go in, and the woman behind the counter, I'm like, you're not going to believe this. I said, he has narcolepsy. Isn't that wonderful? And she looks at me and she goes, my dad has narcolepsy. And I was like, really? I mean, how ironic that was.
Yeah, that's small world.
Yeah. And she said, yeah, he never really slept in bed. He would sleep all over the house because he just couldn't sleep. And then I called my husband up, and he's in medicine. And I'm like, you are not going to believe this. He has narcolepsy. After all these years of trying to figure out and being like this emotional roller coaster and severe anxiety, I'm like, it's narcolepsy. And the phone kind of went silent. And I think he understood what that meant more than I did.
Oh, in a different way. So while
Yeah.
you were more so like happy about the distance.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, we can handle it. Like,
Yeah.
what's treatment, Because in nursing school, they don't really explain it. And it's a very superficial definition that we know narcolepsy is not just a sleep disorder.
Yeah.
It affects every aspect of your life and every system of your body.
Yeah.
So ignorance was bliss in the beginning, right? And we started the typical protocol, but that was just not helpful. He didn't respond well with the old treatment version. So I thought to myself, well, let's get a second opinion just to make sure that we are indeed dealing with narcolepsy, because it's just so rare
Yeah.
and he's so young.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to make sure that this is what we're dealing with, especially since the medication we weren't really seeing to be very effective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we decided to get that second opinion. Indeed, it was narcolepsy type 1. And we just started the typical journey of trying different medications, sleep hygiene, but it's very, very difficult when you are diagnosed as a child, and especially so young. You don't have the language skills to say, I feel this way, or this medication makes me feel this way.
So how did you know? Like, obviously, like observation, but
It was very difficult.
How was he able to articulate, like, he's not like he's not being like, what's the word? Like, he's not being fussy. Like a child that's ill and someone might think, oh, they're just being extra or fussy. But no, they're really trying to tell their parent that this is not working.
I'm going to tell you that I believe every parent, and I as a mom, I think I was very intuitive, and I had to rely on my bond and connection and my intuitive feelings very strongly. And I'm a very spiritual person. And I really had to pray very hard for insight and guidance because it truly was a lot of times a guess and constant observation. I remember writing daily notes on, every time we started a med and just observing him. And I think also my nursing background really helped me that training,
Mm-hmm.
being able to, have the skills to observe, I was trained to observe patients, right?
Yeah.
So, and be able to track that and track the data. So that came in handy. But when you have a young child, a lot of times they're going to express themselves through behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that this was not a behavioral issue
Mm-hmm.
because I knew my son, right? And this was very different. This was not who he was, his character.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that we had to keep searching for answers. And just because you go to the doctor, you get a diagnosis, and they put your child on medication, I assumed at first in the very early stages, okay, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not the case. Everyone reacts to medication differently. Everyone's constitution is different. Some people need more, some people do better with less. And, that has been the learning curve. And then when you're deliriously tired, you also have a hard time emotionally regulating, and it's hard for you to even talk, never mind having these very detailed conversations about how you're feeling. So we had to be keen observers. And one thing that I learned as a nurse is there's always a reason why. There's
Mm-hmm.
always a reason why someone behaves the way that they do. And I did not assume that just because we're on medication and he's supposed to be treated, that he was actually treated and that treatment fit his needs and worked in his body. So some of these behaviors were also symptoms to me that the medication was either too much or not working or not enough. So I think that's one thing that I really developed on this journey is that keen sense of observation and listening to my motherly instinct.
I find that very interesting because as someone who has got narcolepsy when I was 15, and so I got diagnosed when I was 18, and a lot of people who have narcolepsy, who got narcolepsy as an adult, you go through this stage where people have to go through different medications until you find the right medication. But sometimes I find that even if you don't feel like the medication is necessarily working or in your body, the doctors will push and say, no, you need to take it for longer. You need to have it for longer. You can't just make up your mind so quickly. It's you should take it longer to check whether it's really working in your body or whatever. Even if nothing's happening, they usually still push. So I can't even imagine what that must have been like for even like as a child. Like at what point do you say, okay, yeah, I've observed this enough and we're no longer taking this particular one?
And I think that's why it's so important to create a team that you can work collaboratively with. It's not just you go to the doctor and you just sit there and listen to them. This is a team effort. And you have to have that relationship and that trust that doctor is also going to respect your input, respectfully given, but that input, because you are caring for that child on a day-to-day basis. You're observing him or her daily.
Mm-hmm.
So, the caregiver and the patient is really a big part of the team.
Yes.
They're at the front.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with something so complicated and complex, it needs to be a team effort. You need to find the right match when it comes to your sleep specialist.
Mm-hmm.
That is vital. And we've had some amazing doctors along the way. Some of them have been neurologists, pulmonologists, but it was really the right match. Docs that are willing to listen, think outside the box, not just support, but to support us as caregivers. So it's really that holistic approach of, making sure that you are collaborating with doctors that really you match well with.
So as he got older, what were the changes? Did you find there were changes as he grew?
Oh, I think puberty definitely makes things worse. You have the hormones that start flooding and how that affects sleep. And in the teen years, their rhythm usually it gets off where they want to sleep later and to go to bed later. And which is very normal. And then during the teen years, they need more sleep. And with narcoleptics, they struggle to sleep. So I think the teen years were really difficult for sure. They were really difficult.
And how did you go about trying to manage that or navigate that?
Today, we have a lot more support for caregivers. And today, I have been able to really tap into the expertise and experience of other narcoleptics and other caregivers, parents of children. So, for instance, Gina Denise has been really amazing in, supporting and educating the community about diet and lifestyle. And definitely for our son, diet is the foundation of his treatment for sure.
Wow.
Carbs make him more sleepy and gluten definitely affects him. So, more of a low carb, close to a ketogenic diet, he does very well with. And it also improves sleep and it helps his medications work better. So, as a result, he really only needs very low doses to be effective. When he is not complying with the diet, he's definitely more symptomatic.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like stress management, that has been really helpful. He's worked a lot on strengthening his mind, his coping skills, his interpersonal skills, communication, conflict resolution. He's constantly trying to navigate the emotional side because his narcolepsy is triggered by intense emotion.
Mhm. I don't think we talk about this enough. I found it interesting when you were saying at the beginning about the emotional impact it was having and you were noticing. And I think maybe it was more acute because he was a child. He was only 6. And I remember meeting a lady at a conference and her child had just been diagnosed and she was 5. And I had never met someone who had a child been diagnosed so early. And it was interesting because she was saying how, she thought they were telling her it was a brain tumor and all these negative things. And then when they said her child had narcolepsy, she was like so relieved. And she's like, oh, it's nothing. Then, I can live with this until she realized. But then she goes, before they were saying the child was like throwing food like on the floor or wouldn't eat certain colored food, like all these like weird things, tantrums that people were saying that she was having. And she was like, no, this is not tension tantrum. This just started happening with the sleeping and everything. It all has come together like as a package. Yeah. And so as adults, I don't think we talk about the effects of narcolepsy on your mood as much as, I guess, maybe because as adults, you have to regulate your mood to be in public, to be a good member of society. Well, as a child, you don't actually need to do that. You just sort of be.
Right. And what happens when you get diagnosed so early? There's developmental impact on that, right? Because, this disorder is very isolating socially and emotionally. And when you're so incredibly tired, I found as a parent, it was very difficult to, well, what can he control and what can he control? What kind of limits can I set that's reasonable? Because I also have to parent him, but it's very difficult to parent somebody that you're still trying to get treatment for because he's literally not sleeping. So we know that after like 5 days of people not sleeping, they can go psychotic. There is a tremendous impact on the lack of sleep and lack of restorative sleep and, the neurotransmitters that are affected by that. It's not unusual to see depression, anxiety, and then all of the social impact that comes along with that. not being able to participate with friends, going out because of energy levels,
Mm.
or not feeling that, being accepted. I mean, that's already hard as a teenager as it is, never mind having this other layer. It's complicated when you're diagnosed so young. And that's why the support that's available today, Facebook has been incredible.
Yes.
That is really what has connected me as a mom. Without Facebook, I would not have met some amazing moms like Jennifer Bond, who, does Camp Conference. And she's the one that really kind of forged the way of baclofen, the treatment using baclofen for narcolepsy, specifically for children. And baclofen really is what restored our son's sleep architecture. So we did a sleep study without baclofen. He only went in stage 1 sleep. Then we did a sleep study with 10 milligrams of baclofen, and his sleep architecture was normalized.
Wow.
So that was really definitely a medication that, and continues this day, that he uses. But I would never have known that baclofen, which is a very old drug, they even put infants on it. It's not, it has very low side effect, great safety profile, is used for narcolepsy.
What is it normally used for?
It can be used like for spasms. They'll use it. They even use it for infants if they have infantile spasms or MS, but it is sleep promoting. It seems to resolve the sleep architecture issue in people with narcolepsy. But I would not have known that if I wasn't on Facebook, right?
Mhm.
And connected with that mom, because certainly my physician did not have a clue about it at that time. I think that there's a lot more parents going in to their physician and they're becoming more aware. Or, there's other supports of parents. But I didn't have that 17 years ago. It was a
Mhm.
very lonely world. And as a mom, as a caregiver, I went through my own anxiety and depression because, there is, and sometimes we don't talk about this piece enough. I felt definitely a grief process.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that.
Yeah, I definitely did. And, there's really no shame about that, because when you give birth and you have this healthy baby, we all have our expectation.
Mhm.
And I always say that I plan and God laughs,
Mhm.
because you just don't know what can happen in life. And, it's not wrong or right or good or bad, but I have a different son today.
Mhm.
And so I had to transition and adjust to that. And I had to mourn the son that I had
Yeah.
and embrace and rebond with the son that I have today. I think a part of that grief process was my denial, which I have to say lasted for many years. But that denial actually was not helpful to him at all. I had a really hard time saying the word disability
Oh.
and, accepting that, because if I
Mhm.
said it, then I was saying
No.
that my son is disabled. And it was hard for me to let go of the son that I had given birth to.
Mhm.
I remember sitting in a doctor's office one time, and this woman comes in a wheelchair, and she comes in with her mom. And she was very strong, has been through it, and she was very strong minded. And I don't know how she knew this about me. She must have felt it. And before I left, she says to me, "Your son is disabled." And she said, "Don't be ashamed of that word, because that word gives him the resources he needs
Mhm.
to live an independent life that's equitable.
Yeah.
And you cannot get in the way of that."
Yeah, don't rob him of that. Yeah.
And I was like, oh my word. I had no idea that my denial and my own grief, my inability to say that word, was obstructing him getting what he needed. And that was a huge shift for me that day,
Mm.
where I was like, okay, things have to change. So I started to embrace the accommodations that he needed. I started to say that word. I practiced it because he had no problem in saying it.
Ah,
He had no problem. So this is what I'm talking about when this has been the greatest university of my life. There
mm,
is no school, no degree that I could have ever gotten that taught me the lessons that I have learned on this journey,
mm.
you know? And it's like going into the fire of refinement.
Wow.
Yeah, the fire of refinement. So today I'm very grateful that, he takes the lead in his own treatment,
That's good.
his own management, and that he's very comfortable with who he is. And he totally embraces it. And he says, Mom, I have narcolepsy, but I am not narcolepsy.
Mm.
I have it, but I have so many other things that make me me. And I think as a parent, I was so worried about what his future would look like. What would his schooling look like?
Mm.
Long-term effects of lack of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
the physical, the spiritual, the financial. As caregivers, we worry about the whole picture, right?
Yeah.
So I think what was helpful for me is to talk to other parents, but also to get myself the support that I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because obviously my son was comfortable with himself,
Yes.
but I had to come.
That's a really good point. I
Mm,
say getting the care that you need because
yeah,
you always hear this, like, especially if when people have had like a child or a spouse that's had like cancer for a very long time.
mm,
And then in the end, the caregiver gets ill because
mm,
all the attention was given to the person they were caring for to the point of the detriment of not even caring for themselves. So I think you made a really good point. And it's so important for the caregivers to look after their mental health and their well-being.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think what happens to when you have a child that has narcolepsy, like my son slept through the night for the first time at the age of 16. So the amount of sleep deprivation that I felt and my husband felt, because we would take turns,
Mhm.
was unbelievable. And at the same time, you have other children in the house. You're still trying to work to pay bills, and you're trying to also do case management and getting into specialists and doctors and different treatment, trying different treatments. There's a lot to manage.
It's a job in itself.
It totally is a job in itself. And trying to have this normal family life. I mean, that's a lot to juggle,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that sometimes, I know I felt this, like there could be a lot of shame if my son is not functioning at a certain level, right? But what I've learned on this journey, it is like a roller coaster. It goes through peaks and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're doing well, sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
I've had to learn how to ride the wave.
Yes. And narcolepsy comes in waves.
Mm,
If you're young or someone who might be newly diagnosed and they might not be feeling it so much now, I just said enjoy it while it is where it is,
mhm,
because unfortunately it's not going to stay there.
mhm,
This is a lifelong condition. And until we get a cure, you need to prepare yourself for when it's going to dip, because it will dip. You're
mhm,
not going to stay on the high forever.
mhm,
Be 5, 6 years, you're on a nice high and you think you can conquer the world and everything. And it will dip. It will dip. And it
mhm,
will catch you off guard. But you have to be able to ride through it and know you're going to come out the other end.
mhm. I think as a parent, I really was hoping like this magic pill would appear
Mhm.
and he just takes it every day and life goes on.
Yeah.
And that's really not what has happened.
But that's the
Uh-huh.
way the doctors sort of explain it, I found. Even when I was diagnosed as a teenager, that's how they explained it to me. You just take your pill and then you're back to normal. As long as you take your meds, you're
Right.
fine.
Right. The other thing that I learned in reaching out and talking to other moms is really the importance of treating the sleep issue, the distorted sleep. That was just like, that's the critical point. And I think initially, typically, stims are given,
Yeah.
and, this will help you stay awake all day.
Mhm.
And what I saw was an accumulation of a sleep debt happening. And, you become very wired and tired.
Mhm.
So that's where that keen observation, I had to have that keen observation as to what was going on with medications.
Mm.
And it's kind of like with our son, it's kind of like a seesaw. You get the nighttime, doing well, but then the daytime kind of goes off a little bit. And you support the daytime, but it may be too much, and then it affects the nighttime sleep.
Mhm.
So balancing that seesaw is really hard,
Mm.
and depending on what that person ate that day, it could also fluctuate. So what we have learned is we have to have a pretty consistent lifestyle
Mm.
and routine to lessen that impact of those like up and down. But you're still going to get it. It's not going to be perfect. So as a mom, I have learned to go with that and, not get myself overly anxious and worried, which is not always easy, but that's about my own self care. And I have to make sure
Mhm.
that's not projected onto him. That's something that I have to deal with internally. He has enough to
Mm.
deal with. So
Yeah.
that's where that piece comes of where's my support?
Mhm.
Am I getting my sleep?
Mhm.
Am I, how's my quality of life? I
Yeah.
went through this period with my grief that if he could not enjoy life or be happy,
Not neither should you.
exactly. What happened was I remember I did whatever I had to do. So we had this therapist come to the house and just support the whole family. And she's looked at me and said, if you don't choose life, why would he?
Wow.
And, it's these little jolts that the universe gave me
Mm.
that shifted me. And I'm like, okay, I have to choose life so he can see me living. So
Yeah.
he will be motivated to
Could
live.
it? Yes.
And that's when things started to change immediately and the whole house shifted.
Oh, wow.
You
That's
know, I think it's important for parents to hear, that side, that family dynamics every day are not like always happy and rosy. And the feelings that you may have as a parent of like that loss, that mourning, and how do we now move forward and be comfortable with what we were uncomfortable with and accepting that our son or daughter may need resources that not just helps them,
but
but
helps
helps
everyone.
everyone, the entire family.
Mhm.
Right. And I think moving forward, everybody has to move forward. My children, my daughter experienced that sense of grief because she was very close with him. And all of a sudden, he's not motivated to play. He's
Mm.
not laughing. And so helping your other children transition to a new normal.
Mhm. Yes. Because that must be, I can't imagine being, because the age difference between me and my sisters is 5 and 6 years. But I can't imagine if you were a 2 year or 18 month apart from a sibling, and then something dramatic sort of happened and they changed and they didn't want to play with you or didn't have the energy and stuff anymore. It would make you feel almost a bit like rejected and stuff. Not, even if an adult explained to you that it wasn't your fault or whatever, but as a child, understand all of those feelings and
And
things.
why are you giving him more attention than me?
Mhm.
Right? And it's not that we're giving him more attention, but the needs are more intense and they're
Yeah.
different. Through the eyes of the other children, we had to get professional support because we didn't really know how to navigate that.
Mm.
And then with each other, parent kind of processes it differently. And I'm more verbal about my feelings where, his dad isn't. And how do we support that within each other and giving each other space when needed? So I think I realized that I had to be willing to listen to other people that had the experience and also the expertise to help us navigate this.
That's beautiful. I think that this is something I'm very passionate about, that I think we've got to work on changing in the community. I love the different things that you did with your family to navigate that. And I think that's something that could be used, especially to help adults in this situation, because although it was dealt with differently as a child. I think that people who are diagnosed in their 20s or their late teens are experiencing the same things with their siblings, but because you're older, there might be an even bigger disconnect with how the sibling is taking the situation on, how they're understanding the illness. If you're an adult and your siblings are adults, do they understand it? How do they feel that your parent is navigating the situation? Do they feel that you're taking advantage of or milking their parents' love? Like different things that the sibling might be going through, but they're not so open to talk about it as in maybe a child would.
And also, like, his needs were a little bit more obvious, but I had to make sure as a mom, my other children's needs were not minimized because they were just as important. And extended family, I mean, there's some great YouTube videos that I would forward his grandparents and his cousins because it just really explained better than I ever could about what was going on. Because when people think of narcolepsy, they're like, oh, you just fall asleep. And it's not like that. Like, why can't you come and visit us? Why can't he just stay at grandma's, for 2 weeks out of the summer? Because it's not that simple. And we have to follow a strict sleep schedule. And their perception may be like, wow, you're kind of strict, but they don't understand the consequence of that lack of consistency.
Yeah.
And his nighttime sleep and that the quality of that really determines his daytime function.
Yeah. And it's more important to keep that consistency and that routine in check than it is to make someone else in the family happy.
Exactly. So you learn quickly not to be a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Like that was cured. Like no more of that. We're not pleasing anybody. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on really was the school journey. Because that was scary. And, it's hard for any child to sit in a classroom 7, 8 hours a day and, listening to lectures and doing work that they may not find interesting. So you add a kiddo that's super sleepy that, it's really hard to find the right treatment, because a lot of the treatments back then were not for children. So we had a very limited options. I think that made me the most anxious is, just getting to school, making it through a day, the accommodations of napping, navigating teachers that just did not have a clue, or other students that didn't understand what was happening. With his narcolepsy, he could look awake, but he's really asleep. That made me very anxious. And I learned a huge lesson when it comes to that. Things do eventually work out, and there are many ways to educate your kid. I learned that 7 hours of school is really 1 hour of academic teaching.
Wow.
So I had to create a very customized, individualized program for him. And I was very thankful that the school worked with me on that. And that's really what our initiative focuses on, is the educational piece. And we're right now focused on creating a program, partnering with other people, educational specialists, attorneys, other resources for parents to create that customized, individualized education plan. Because in the United States, every child has a right to a free and appropriate public education. And so there are ways, non-traditional ways, to get them through school. And thankfully, our son loved to learn. So he was a very avid reader. But you also have the social and emotional piece that's just as important. And narcolepsy can be very isolating.
Yes.
I wish back then I had the support, but that's why we want to give parents that support today, how to navigate that and the expertise that we kind of learned on our own journey.
Yeah. And to share that with others. That's really nice. So, Gina, any last statements you'd like to say to the audience?
I think that in every situation, my friend used to tell me how a pearl is made. And she said to me, it's really up to you how you choose how this is going to end up. And I realized early on that I had some choices that I had intentionally had to make. And those choices affected the rest of the family and how the rest of the family reacted and navigated this huge change in our life, and how our son was going to embrace his new normal, especially being so young. Us parents really had to lead by example of how we were going to get through this storm. And I tell my kids, it's kind of like Sully, that story of Sully where he landed the plane on the Hudson River, New York City. And I said, I feel like I'm landing this plane. There might be injuries, but I don't want any death. It doesn't mean it's gonna be easy.
Yeah, I like you laugh.
It doesn't mean it's gonna be easy. So I just hope that, coming forward and coming on your podcast brings some kind of measure of comfort and validation, and trying to be authentically honest that although it's not an easy journey, the support out there can make a huge difference in the quality of life, the treatment, the early diagnosis, and the support for the family as a whole. It's different today.
Well, there's one last question we usually ask all the people who come on. So if you could press a red button and get rid of narcolepsy, would you press it?
For my son, I would press the button.
You'd press the button.
I would. For my son, I would.
Cool.
I would. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, Gina. It was lovely hearing your story, and we have so many nuggets in there that people can learn from and put into practice and help them through their journeys. And we usually end the podcast by saying happy napping. That's right.
Happy napping. You're doing great work. You're doing great work. And it's a privilege for me to support you. And I'm going to do everything I can to continue to support you.
Thank you very much, Gina. I really appreciate it.
Okay. You have a great night.
Yeah, you too, darling. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Views and opinions in these stories may not work for everyone. If anything you have heard is relatable, please see a doctor for advice. Narcolepsy Navigators is produced by a team of volunteers working for the Naps for Life CIC, which is a non-profit group dedicated to improving the lives of people with sleep disorders through community action. You can help grow our podcast and join our sleep disorder support group by visiting the website www.napsforlife.com. If you or someone you know has a sleep disorder and would like to share your story on Narcolepsy Navigators, please email us at narcolepsynavigators@gmail.com. You can also support us by donating at the website. Happy napping, everyone.